I said, should we get right into this?
I'm ready. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with the one and only, the original bad guy, Chael P. Sonnen, Wrestling's original bad guy, the original gangster, the trash talker. What else? What else did I miss? The YouTuber, fighter, number one contender, personality. What else?
I think you nailed it. By the way, I got to tell you, congratulations. Like, I really feel like you get to share in that celebration with Tom. I mean, you were calling that. You're the one that alerted the public. Tom laid out a roadmap. It was after his last fight in England, but he laid out a roadmap as a round robin where I'm going to go to Paris and, you know, the surreal gone and then the winner. And you co-signed it. You're like, that's a really great idea. But I must tell you, I already liked Tom and I already believed in Tom, but I thought he was a little bit young. And I thought that because Tom said as much. I watched some of his interviews and he kind of said, well, give me just a minute. Jon Jones is something really special. And I remember your excitement when he laid out that plan and it sold me. I even called Daniel Cormier and I go, hey, what's the deal? Is Bisping like his manager or something? Or is this authentic? And he goes, it's real. Bisping sees how great this kid could be. And you called it and good job.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because DC called me when I was in New York. I think it was Thursday. He called me and he's like, Bisping, what are you doing? Why are you hyping this kid so much? Are you just trying to create hype? Are you trying to create a storyline? And I'm like, no, not at all. I said, he's legit. I said, have you seen his fights? Have you seen the way that he beats people? I said, yeah, we're friends, but it's not like we go back a long way. I've only met him since he was a UFC fighter. We're from the same part of the world, so we clicked pretty easily. You know, he's come on the podcast a few times. I said, but I'm basing everything I say off the performances. And of course, for me, he went out there, proved me right, but more importantly for him, became the champion of the world. Unbelievable. What did you make of that performance, Chael?
I thought it was amazing. And again, if I'm to go back to him, I have to take a fighter at his word. And this was over a year ago, but he did talk about Jon Jones. I need 3 fights. I need 3 fights before I take on Jon Jones. Now, it's been a couple of fights, and I'm saying we're getting closer, but what I'm sharing for you, Michael, I think he surprised himself. Everything I'm trying to tell you is to get to that. I saw something great. You saw something great. I'm not 100% sure that he did. I mean, even when he got this fight on short notice, I read an interview, and he's like, well, it's too good to pass up. This is what we do it for. But I would have liked to have a little bit more time. I didn't think he was underplaying it. I didn't think he was trying to remove pressure. I thought he was being very sincere. And I'm not positive, and you see guys like this all the time, but I think Garry might fall into the same category. I don't think Tom knows how good Tom is. And maybe that belt will change things, but maybe not. And sometimes that humility, it turns out to be a real friend. Sometimes confidence isn't really what a guy needs.
Well, as we know as fighters, you definitely need confidence. And I think he does have it. I mean, of course he does. I mean, he just went out and knocked out Sergey Pavlovich, for crying out loud. I just think he is that guy. He is humble. And he said initially when he got to the UFC, he wanted to slow roll it, you know, and then after that injury, everything changed because he realized, you know, what he could have lost. He knew what was at his fingertips and he knew, listen, let's go for it. He believed in himself. So unbelievable. I've talked about that at extreme lengths, But what did you think? Were you surprised?
And Michael, can I tell you, I think you cut out there for just a second if I missed your question, but could I do this? The big thing for every fighter, we had 11 fights on Saturday, we had 11 winners, but it's the same question to all of them, which is, what's next? Yeah. And this fight was very much set as though it was a placeholder. I find that very disrespectful for a perennial class, not to mention for a champion. Even if it's interim champion, that's still a world. I don't care what word comes in front of world. That is world champion. And to have a placeholder, I don't know if I fully agree with that. Where I'm going with that is he did this favor on short notice. It was 2.5 weeks, but we're all supposed to wait for an injury for Jon Jones. And at this point, we can't rush it and have the competitors. We must, as human beings, say, Jon, get well. Take care of yourself. We'll wait, the cheers, the booze, but we'll put it on hold until you're healthy. But we're told that could be 8, 9, 10 months. And to imagine that somebody like Tom is going to have to wait, not to mention we're told that with the interim title doesn't come a number 1 contendership. I don't know how much I'm buying that. And I'm not sure why we wait for Jon. Like, I don't hate the idea of Tom versus Stipe. And Dana White had made the comment last week that he never even tried to make that because offering Stipe an interim title would be disrespectful. When Dana said it, I got it. That actually made a level of sense to me at the time. But here we are a week later, seeing Tom, seeing him on top of the world at MSG, seeing him put that belt around his waist, there is nothing disrespectful about offering Stipe that fight now, in my opinion.
Well, that's it, because the way that he beat Sergey, had it been 5 rounds, had it been a close fight, had it been back and forth, all right, maybe there wouldn't have been the thirst that there is now. But going out there and stopping him, 69 seconds, one of the most scariest guys we've ever seen in the heavyweight division. I mean, Tom sat there last week. I think he was speaking to your buddy, Ariel Helwani, and he was saying, look, listen, I don't think the thirst is there for Stipe versus Jon Jones. And I don't know. I mean, listen, as a fan, I still want to see Stipe versus Jon Jones. It is a legacy fight. What do you think about this, though? Because there is a potential, it's been spoke about, that both guys are going to retire pretty soon, right? I think for Jon Jones, the perfect plan would be, because, listen, we know what he's accomplished at light heavyweight. There's no ifs and buts. He's incredible, okay? Become the heavyweight champ, beat the greatest heavyweight champion, Stipe, and then beat the #1 contender, or as we now have, the interim champion. If he wasn't, and by the way, hypothetical, let's just assume he beats Stipe. Let's assume that, and that's a big assumption. But if he was to do that, and he wasn't to fight Tom Aspinall, I mean, how would that make him look, in your opinion?
Yeah. And I'll tell you this, that's never going to go away. Even if we're discussing Tom right now, whenever that day comes for Jon, he's going to be faced with that. Like, if I was just to take the tape back 1 week ago, I was hearing the same thing, except it was Pavlich. Jon Jones would never fight Pavlich, and that started 5 months prior. He will never fight Sergey Pavlich. I felt as though that had to go away. Right. Why would he not? And not to mention, Michael, when Sergey got put as a backup fighter, that is Jon and Stipe agreeing to fight Sergey Pavlich. I mean, not for nothing, but prior to that, it was Francis Ngannou. And I only said we went from Francis to Sergey, and now we're at Tom. So wherever Jon Jones goes in his career, he is likely going to have to face that. That really is just a reality for most guys. But, I mean, it's a bit of a riddle, right? Jon Jones and Stipe are going to fight for the championship, but it's a retirement fight. So Tom, who's interim champion, sits in the front row, watches the match. No matter who wins, they say into the microphone, I retire, of which time that leaves their mouth, Tom is now elevated to undisputed champion without ever throwing a punch. To me, that means Tom's the champion. I'm not fully following this math. It would seem like Jon's comeback fight is just that. He would be coming back for his championship that he never lost. He also has an opportunity to do that 205 pounds. That's a championship that he never lost. But it feels to me like that's a return fight. And I'm not sure we don't need to stare at that a little bit closer. If Jon is to return in 10 months, that will mean he's had one fight in 3 years, and his opponent Stipe has done one fight in 4 years. And by the way, he lost the one fight. I just don't think that's a story they're going to be able to tell with a healthy, willing, and able Aspinall in the front row.
And dying to fight him as well. He is dying to fight Jon Jones. Recently, I partnered with a company called Legacy Precious Metals. Now, I know a lot of people are going through tough times right now, but if you are fortunate enough to where you have a few dollars left over every month to think about investing, then maybe investing in gold and silver through Legacy Precious Metals might be for you. Now, the stock market, if you follow that stuff, it's all over the place. In fact, it's plummeting right now. But precious metals, they've always held their value or even increased. So, of course, that's something that we're all interested in. Does it have to be a lot of money? It can just be a little bit, because it all adds up over time. Now, if you click the link, there is a guide there. It'll tell you all about investing in gold and silver, or you can give them a call and they will answer all of your questions at 866-933-0317. Anyway, listen, I've talked about that until the cows come home. Here's what I want to ask you. You're all over the internet right now, Chael. What is going on with this tattoo of Anderson Silva? Come on. And how did this even happen? Let's have a look. Come on.
You know what? If I could pull this darn shirt down, I would show you. So Anderson Silva has a piece, and I got to plug him. It's coming out on Amazon Prime, but it's called Anderson Spider Silva. And not the, and I have to tell you the exact words in case people type it into search like me. Anderson Spider Silva. It's on Paramount Plus. I said Prime. Michael, this thing is so damn good. It's made by the same people that made Yellowstone, just to put that in perspective. When I heard Anderson was having his own TV show, I assumed it was a documentary. It's not like that at all. It starts when he's 6 years old, goes all the way through high school, talks about family problems, talks about struggles, talks about legal problems, what ultimately leads him to the cage. it's a really great show. And this all answers to your tattoo question because I was participating in a promotion for the show. I did not get a tattoo. I didn't lose a bet.
Yes, there it is. There it is.
Yes, but that's the answer. And I will tell you, I saw some clips of this, man. That I was really impressed how well this thing was done. There's some actors that you'll recognize, and it's bilingual. It's very good. Yeah,
well, it's not surprising, is it? I mean, it's Anderson Silva. He's going to have a lot of people, a lot of interest, a lot of big players, Hollywood producers, all the rest of it. So the tattoo's fake.
Yes, tattoo's fake. It was a sticker, and it's long gone.
I thought that it was a cool picture, though. You're there with the glasses on, you're getting, you're having a look at it. You know what I mean? I was like, because I sat there with my wife last night. I said, babe, look at this. Look at this. And she's like, what is that? I said, Chael's got a tattoo of Anderson. And I legit, for a split second, I bought it. I thought it was real. And it was my wife. She went, well, that's fake. Do you have any other tattoos, Chael? I don't think you do. Do you have one on your chest?
No, I have no tattoos. I'm a registered Republican. Like, I mean, it's a whole thing that I would have. I got to tell you, like, I wanted to be part of the marketing, and I was so well known, like, for losing a fight. Like, that's just generally how you want to do it.
No, dude, I've been there. Dan Henderson, UFC 100, haunted me for years.
Perfect example. Yes. And, I remember being in high school and like that was my time to show. We were in high school. I remember being at football games and dudes that had graduated years before would come to the games wearing their Letterman's jackets. And I'd always be so embarrassed for those guys. And the only reason I bring that up, it's like my time with Anderson, I did value it, but it was a long time ago. To get a tattoo of it, I mean, I would really be ashamed, quite frankly. Like if somebody else did it, I'd look at that guy and go, hey, man, you're a weird guy. You need to grow up.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I put a tweet out. You might have saw it. I said, we're going to be talking. And someone said, did he feed the bus the carrot? I mean, you had some amazing lines going into that one, Chael. I still laugh. I mean, the whole thing about what was it? I talk about these people don't know what I've been through. Yeah, sure, we had a maid, but she only came once a week or whatever it was, mate. Brilliant. Absolutely fantastic. What do you make of the new generation's version of trash talk? Because, you had your style. Obviously, Conor McGregor came through. I had, the shit talk that I would use. But what do you think of guys like Ian Garry? Of course, Colby Covington. I love what he does. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, well, and I'm glad you threw yourself into that. I thought you were going to say Conor and then try to like step out of it. It's like, no. You were knee deep in that too. And you want to know who was great? And he always gets left out, but I thought he was one of the originals, was Rampage.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
First guy ever. And I used to watch UFC. We'd have buddies over and get the pizzas and do the whole quintessential thing. Rampage was the first guy ever where when he gets ready to talk, we quiet, everybody quiet. And we turn the TV up. The first guy ever. And he always had something clever. And he was saying it was funny and it was charismatic. But I enjoy the guys now. I enjoy the entertainment area. I buy Ian Garry. I mean, that's one of the things. It has to be believable. I don't know when a guy's being real when he's working a character, but if I believe it, it's good enough for me. I happen to buy Garry. I think that's who he is. I think he's a pretty brash guy. I think he's a fantastic fighter. I put him in that same category as Aspinall. I don't know that Gary's ready to be world champion, but in terms of he's better than he thinks he is. When Ian Garry, and speaking of tattoos, when he got the number 15 ranking in the world, he went and tattooed that on. He was so proud of 15. I remember seeing it at the time and going, hey, you better stop because you're a lot higher than 15. You're going to be there soon. He's going to find himself in a championship match with one or two more wins. And I like these guys now. I know Colby works pretty hard at it. He's only got so much energy. People are pulling at him from all directions now that he's a main event and the top guy. But I think it's fun. I like that the triple C and the cringe. And, some people didn't like it, but I was entertained.
I was very entertained as well. Speaking of Ian Garry, and I wasn't going to go there yet, I was going to bring up the trash talk between us because when we fought, everyone thought that we were going to go back and forth and have this war of words and it would be so entertaining, but it was just like a week's notice. And I've told the story a few times and we've discussed it as well. When we squared up in Chicago on the weigh-ins and you square it up and it's always the last minute, it's like, I'm going to talk some shit. I'm going to try and intimidate this guy. I'm going to look into his eyes, look into his soul. I'm going to try and scare him. And I did my best thing. And you're like, what is that cologne? Yep. You smell amazing, Bisping. And I was like, you just emasculated me instantly. It was genius. It was perfect. And it was absolutely hilarious.
Well, you did it back to me. That wasn't actually meant to be a gameplay. Like everybody that faces off with that, you always, at some point, your heads are touching. And I remember when I said it, and I remember thinking that was a weird thing to say. And then you responded and you go, well, thank you very much.
I mean, what else can I say? I'm like,
Right.
this guy's nice. He's cool as hell.
But that's the part you love. Like, I've heard you tell that story, and you always leave out that you go, well, thank you very much. And you might have even said my name. You might have said, well, thank you, Chael. Whatever it was. No, I feel like maybe they wasted us, in all fairness, because when we had 8 days, I feel like we could have, we probably could have had a little bit bigger build for that. But, man, those are great memories. Part of a lifetime ago, but I cherish those things. In fighting, you only get, 30 or 40 times to do that. So those are valuable. Hey, would you tell me this, though? Because you brought up Ian Garry, and I've actually went to him twice. I don't want to get sidetracked. So Ian Garry, the way the story goes, he leaves Sanford MMA because he's getting ready to fight his teammate, Luque. He goes to England. First off, I'm not positive that was true or if he's planning to be in England anyway. So that's the first part of my question. Second part of the question, Leon's coaches, on behalf of Leon, say, hey, same weight class, getting a little too familiar, go somewhere else. Is that accurate? And if so, where did he go? If he already left Sanford and now where did he go?
Yeah, I don't know. I did see Ian Garry down in Brazil. We had a little talk about it, and you'll see this week Leon Edwards is doing a bunch of interviews. Paddy's doing interviews. Apparently, there's this whole thing that he knocked out Ian Garry in training. That's what Paddy Pimblett's been saying, so maybe that started a bit of it. But then Leon said today, I saw a little video where he said, look, listen, he just didn't kind of vibe with our culture at the gym. He would rock up, and this is Leon's words, not mine. He said he would rock up. He would always have his YouTube people. There was cameras everywhere. He would often be late for training sessions. Sometimes he was a little disrespectful, things like that. You know how he is. He's a brash guy. He's a confident man. He's a bit of a shit talker. And he said it just didn't work out. Now, look, listen, I mean, I kind of understand that. I kind of get that. And I also understand the coach's perspective that, they probably are destined. They probably are on a crash course anytime soon. If Ian Garry gets past Vicente Luque, then, maybe one more fight and he might be up. And certainly now with this made up real beef, as they say these days, you never know. Maybe they will be on on a collision course, as they say. So I don't know. But the thing is, as you know, Chael, when we're training, we're trying to get our hands on the best training partners possible. We will fly people in from the other side of the world. You have to pay them a fee. You have to pay their flights, pay their hotels. If you've got a guy like Ian Garry willing to fly himself to the gym, pay his own airfare, etc., I mean, that's a fantastic thing. But I guess ultimately the coach made the call. But what do you think about that?
Well, there's a strategy in there. I mean, on one hand, it hurts my feelings, but I come from a wrestling background. Like, I went to the same gym every day, and if I would have kind of rised my way up to the guys I looked up to, and I'm getting a little closer to them, but I still admire them. The rankings are saying I'm closer to other people, but that's still one of my heroes. And the coach who I trust like a father tells me to leave. Like, I would have been devastated. Now, with that said, I don't know that that's what happened here. It sounds like Garry gets the psychology. He was in the room with Luque and thought, well, we're a little bit too close if we're going to compete. So then when Leon did the exact same thing to him, I don't know that feelings were hurt, but that's the part of the dynamic. That's the part of the dynamic I don't understand. I'll also tell you this. If Leon is feeling him, and let's just say he feels threatened, he thinks that that's a really good fighter that could be in my future, and he's got youth or whatever it might be, that's a great time to cozy up. I mean, not for nothing, but that's a great way to avoid a fight is to not make it one.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, see it all the time. Merab Dvalishvili and Aljamain Sterling, and the list goes on. There's been so many through the ages.
Perfect example. Right.
Jon Jones, Rashad Evans. No, that's maybe doesn't work.
Well, but if Leon really thought that, like, there is kind of a game to play, and you alluded to it a moment ago, but these guys could match up. Don't forget, they're on the same card. So you're going to have Ian Garry. He can do more work with one win and one shot on a microphone than other guys could do with 3 years of victories. And you got Leon 3 fights later, not to mention the plan is to give Leon to Belal. But there's something about that Leon's not totally into. And maybe it's a respect for Belal. Maybe he's already felt him. I don't know what it is. But Leon hasn't been overly helpful in keeping that vibe going. In fact, Michael, 10 minutes before I came on with you today, I read an interview with Leon where he's talking about, if I beat Colby, I'm going up to 185. So it just is one of these things where it looks like he's trying to I don't think the UFC is going to let that happen. I'm sharing with you, there's a lot of moving parts and nothing's done till it's done. You get 2 guys that have this backstory that's very real, and they're on the same card, separated by 45 minutes on a microphone. It's powerful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because the thing is, I mean, Belal Muhammad, we know what he wants. I think he said to me last week he was 10 fights undefeated. I haven't checked. I don't know if that's real. But if it is, then that's fantastic. I don't know if he's had 10 fights since Leon. Oh, he's probably saying because it was an eye poke, so he's undefeated.
Right. He's unbeaten. Man. He's the man that stopped Leon's win streak. That's another way to say it, right? You're playing with words.
Exactly. I don't think Leon's ducking him, but you know the deal. If you move up a weight class, I mean, you did it against Jon Jones on very, very short notice. If you move up a weight class and if you are the champion, you've got nothing to lose. You've got nothing to risk. So it's a free shot. It's like Volkanovski going up against Islam Makhachev twice. And yeah, sure, on 2.5 weeks' notice, that's beautiful. It's great. Takes a lot of courage. But again, you roll the dice. You've got nothing to lose. You get credit from everybody. You know, everyone says you're a legend. You're amazing. What a guy. This is the definition of a real fighter. You get paid a shit ton of money. And if you lose, you're in the exact same position. So everybody wants to do that. So you don't think that there's a shot of that happening?
I don't hate the idea. I mean, guys get hurt and there's changes. Sergey and Tom 3 weeks ago were not supposed to fight, particularly for a world championship. I mean, things move really fast. And I think that Garry is positioning himself well. I wouldn't predict for you that Bilal's going to get in front of it outside of, a mistake or something happened. But who thought Jon Jones would get hurt, picking somebody up? By the way, I'm jumping around a little bit, but if you do go back to Jon Jones, that is one guy that does have the power to fight Tom instead of Stipe. Jon Jones owes himself one thing, which is to make the most money against the most favorable opponent. But he does have the power to say, Stipe, I got to deal with this guy. I owe you one, and I'll get it to you. You're retired. I'm not. Let me deal with him, and I'll see you in a minute. I don't know that he's going to do that, but I think that it would be helpful if Tom started to push that. Because I think that Stipe has a counter, which isn't, no, I'll ignore him and you ignore him and I'll see you in a year, old man. I think it's, no, I'm going to fight him before I get to you. You got the right trilogy. Give me Tom quickly. Stipe was ready. He was in shape. He looked good, right? He gained like 20 pounds since the Francis fight. It's a very different Stipe. I'd like to see him, but there's a massive game going on right now. I mean, we cannot take the UFC at their current plan, which is to hold Tom out in the prime of his career so two guys that are supposedly retiring can fight in a best case scenario in 10 months from now. Like something in that plan has to change.
Well, it has to. So what do you think? I mean, I would suggest and I would think the natural course of events would be Tom defends the interim title. He's a healthy guy. He's the only champion they've got right now. He's not going to sit on the sidelines. As you say, it's going to be at least a year before Jones returns. If he does continue fighting, and that's a big if, let's be honest, if he does continue fighting, he's not going to come back for at least another 6 months. So if Tom doesn't defend the interim title, which is a weird thing, and I don't think we've seen that before, but it's going to be 18 months. He's 30 years old. He's in the prime of his career. He just knocked out Sergey Pavlovich in 69 seconds. Hasn't got a mark on him. Of course he has to defend. I would say Cyril Gane, potentially a Curtis Blades rematch because we saw what happened there. But just hypothetically, talking about Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall, I was thinking, I don't see a way for Jones to win that fight. But then you look at the fights with DC and Daniel Cormier. And we know how great DC is at wrestling. And we know Tom's a big, strong guy. He can wrestle. He can take people down. But I don't know if he's got the wrestling credentials. Well, he hasn't got the wrestling credentials of a Daniel Cormier. And Jones was able to take him down. What would be a path to victory, or would that be the path to victory for a Jones versus Aspinall matchup?
And one thing about Jon, like he's known as, and I think they'll write about him 20 years from now, for what a technician he is. He used to come out in all of his fights and he'd do a move we've never even seen before. Like I remember when he came over Glover's arm and just ripped his bicep off 20 seconds into the fight. Yep. And but he's always doing things like this that are brand new and innovating. That gets noticed. What's a little harder to see is that some bitch is tough. I mean, when it gets hard, we all want a way out, and so fighters we stay in there just a little bit longer. Jon Jones will stay in there regardless of how hot the heat gets. I mean, I'll go back to the night that I competed with him, but he had his bones sticking through his foot. They had an ambulance to take him to the hospital. He refused, wrapped his foot himself. To go to the press conference, then went to the hospital later. I mean, there's things that he's digging deep like he did with Gustafsson. Every upset comes from one ingredient, which is the guy that gets upset finds himself in a fight that's harder than he thought it was going to be. And that happened to Jon against Gustafsson. It happened with Jon in the round with Vitor. There was ways out, and he never takes it. I mean, I just got to tell you, he is dog tough, and I don't know enough about Jon at heavyweight. History says he can't do it, but history says that Francis Ngannou is going to get beat up by a younger Tyson Fury too. I mean, every now and then you have these one-offs. And Jon, when he took down Ciryl Gane, if you can remember that fight in your head, but that was not a takedown. Nobody was more surprised that Ciryl fell down than Jon. And so it was one of those spots where we just didn't get to see a lot, right? We have a heavyweight champion of the world who I'm not positive has ever punched a heavyweight. We have a heavyweight champion of the world who I am positive has never been punched by a heavyweight. He's never been kicked by a heavyweight. There's a lot of questions on Jones. And I think that Aspinall's a big problem. And if I was to go back at taking guys at their word, Jon Jones left the sport for 3 years. He left a world championship. Now, I can't relate to this. I worked my whole life to be world champion. Jon Jones had so much success. He gave one back. I couldn't even imagine. This guy was so good, he gave a belt back. But, Michael, when he did it, he said, I'm going to heavyweight, and I need to get bigger. And I remember thinking, no, you don't. Right now, he walks around about 225. You can walk in there right now and deal with everybody. But he said, no, size matters. I'm going to slow down. I'm going to pass up on the money and the fame and the opportunities, and I'm going to go lift weights, and I'm going to get bigger. So I'm only bringing that to you because Jon himself believes that size matters, and Tom is just under the heavyweight limit. I mean, Tom ain't much different than fighting Francis Ngannou. So I think that Jon would have a respect at a minimum. I think that Jon would take him serious at a minimum. So how Jon is going to go out there and try to skin that cat, that's anybody's guess. I would imagine he'd try to close the distance. He'd use some of those legs, but Tom moves awfully well, man. He's quick for a big guy.
Yeah, no, I mean, you said a lot there. There's a lot of things to say. I mean, the thing is, I mean, you bring up Jon taking away 3 years away from the sport. I don't know why he did that. That's a long time. That's a lot of money left on the table, a lot of, accolades, defenses, etc. You name it, there's plenty there. And it also takes away from the spectacle of moving up. I mean, when DC did it, when DC stepped up, not short notice, he had a full training camp, but it was the next fight. I don't know what it was, 6 months or whatever it was, stepped up, fought Stipe Miocic, knocked him out with the left hook, right hook, whatever it was. I mean, that's the story, because as we know, DC's a big boy, cuts down to 205, and that's kind of what you want to see. Do you think that took away from the spectacle and the marvel of what he accomplished against Ciryl Gane? And do you think Jon Jones doesn't get the credit? Because if I don't know about you, anytime on my channel, if I talk, because I think Jones is probably the greatest. You can't deny what he did. You can't deny the performances and the way he's beating people at their own game, the game plans that he comes up with and all the rest of it. And apparently a lot of the time wasn't even training. But if I even say that, if I even allude to that, my word, the Nurmagomedov fan base, the Islam Makhachev fan base, they come after me. They absolutely crucify me. They say that I'm anti-Muslim and all this kind of nonsense and carry on. What do you think?
He is so wildly talented. I mean, I'll tell you this. If Jon Jones takes you down, when you get up, whether you scramble or the end of the round, the referee brings you up, if Jon Jones gets on top of you, when you get up, you are now different. You are not the same competitor. And that's what I think he does better than anything. I think his ground and pound is number one. He got a little bit away from it. As he slowed down just a little bit, which happens with age, the takedown wasn't there as often. So he went to some other tactics. He found other ways to win fights. But, I mean, when you ask what he's so good at, one time against Rashad Evans, he jumped and pulled guard just because he'd never been down before. He just wanted to be down in a fight. Right? His mind works in like this kind of an odd way. Even to go back what we talked about. And again, all of these things can't be true, but I'm telling the story the way the story is being told now. Jon Jones's next fight is his retirement fight. Well, what's that about? It's not about the heavyweight championship. He's already got it. It's not about beating Stipe. That's not one that you have to have for your legacy. It's about the money. Well, he retired for years. If he would have done 2 or 3 fights, he'd be long gone. He'd be off in the sunset. And I only bring that to you because Stipe is largely playing the same game. He said, I want to fight Jones. But he's also made it pretty clear, I got one left and this is my payday. And I'm just saying, why wait? Why not go in there right now against Aspinall? I'm not sure that the water's not just as warm for Stipe, that the prize couldn't be just as good. And if you're doing one more and you're showing yourself out the door, it would just seem that there would at least be an argument for why wait? Let's get this over with, honey.
The prize is essentially the same. Now, I understand because Tom Aspinall's out there and he's saying, and we got lots of other things to talk about, but Tom Aspinall's saying he wants Jon Jones. That's his dream fight. And of course, anyone that's a heavyweight or a light heavyweight at that time, coming up in the sport, that's the guy you want to face. You want to face the toughest competition. Unlike this Jake Paul idiot who's out there cherry picking fights, you want tough competition. That's what a real fighter does. But right now, Stipe's not getting any younger. What is he? Almost 42 years old. And right now, Tom Aspinall is the heavyweight champion of the world. And if he goes out there, fights him, beats him, then the Jon Jones fight is still there. But I guess there's a lot of things that can go wrong. Talking to fights, I want to ask you about this. and talking about, is this real? Talking about, is this trash talk? Ariel Helwani. What was all that about? Because when I watched that, I'm like, yeah, this is a bit the pulling the wool over everybody's eyes. Was that real?
Oh, yeah. Oh, it was real.
Really?
I mean, I got to tell you, I left in a somewhat cowardly, like when people hang up on me or something, what are you doing? That's a punk move. I had to do that to Ariel, but Michael, my throat was gone. What do they call it? Being hoarse or laryngeal. I couldn't scream anymore.
I did hear that. Yeah.
And Ariel came.
I'm the same way.
He came from a perspective, and there is something I expect from Ariel. Like if I came on here, Michael, and I said a guy's name wrong, or I gave you a fact that wasn't right, you let it blow, because that's what Chael does. I'm an opinion guy. I don't break news. I don't report news. I watch the sport. I'm a fan. But Ariel is different. As a journalist of the year 13 times over, when he says something.
Oh, and he'll let you know about that.
Yeah. Oh, he will. He sure will. But he is generally accurate. Like he doesn't just claim to be a journalist. He got a degree in journalism. Yeah, and he's very good. And he was coming in with some kind of an overlay. Francis having a wonderfully competitive, surprisingly competitive matches with Tyson somehow, and there was a lot of people, but Ariel was adding to it. This is egg in the face of Dana White. And I'm looking there just going, I don't understand. Dana didn't promote the fight. And Dana didn't even watch the fight. I have no idea what Dana has to do with this. For the good parts of it or the bad parts of it, I have no idea how trying to praise Francis's performance against Fury equals a commentary on Dana. I just didn't get that. Then Ariel was also trying to say it was this big financial win. It's like, Ariel, timeout. First off, there's two ways to look at the fight. Competitively, it greatly exceeded expectations. Financially, that's the only other option. You have two ways to look at it. Financially met expectations. They expected to lose a fortune, and they did. That's what happened.
Is it true? But what was it, like 60,000 downloads, pay-per-views in the States? You know, and there's all this talk of 10 million, 20 million. God knows what the real number is. I'm sure he did very, very well. And God bless him. Good for him, you know. But, I mean, listen, who cares? It is what it is. He's not with the UFC anymore. They tried to make a deal. They couldn't come to an agreement. It's done. It's over. He's gone off. He's with doing his boxing. He's with the PFL. To your point, Ariel loves to bring it up and try and stir the pot a little bit. And obviously, there's some hard feeling there from Ariel Helwani. I don't know why he gets on his high horse about it, but hey, it is what it is. It is what it is.
Well, it kind of was one of these strange situations. And you asked me, was that number real? And what was reported was 75,000. And no, it wasn't. 75 was extremely lofty. Now, North American pay-per-view.
Really?
Yes, North American pay-per-view is not what it used to be, though. Like if you came through 2010, 2012, it's a completely different business. But in front of everything else, they pirate so much stuff. It's very tough in North America from a security standpoint. Now, I'm having a different conversation than the one we are, but no, the 75,000 was grossly inflated. And Michael, I got to tell you, I work for ESPN. The fight was on ESPN. I planned to watch the fight. It turned out it was on at 11 in the morning. I thought it was on at 7 p.m. like a normal time for a fight would be. I also thought it was $50. Turned out it was $80. I mean, there was a number of reasons that this thing was set up to not do well, but it really was a baffling standpoint. And I'd like to add this, a little bit of a different direction, but I'd like to add this. When it comes to involving Dana White in a boxing match that lost a fortune, Dana said, I don't want the match because it's going to lose a fortune. He was right. So what? It was more competitive than he thought. So was Floyd and Connor. The buy button is already pushed. However great the match is or spectacular the knockout, it doesn't change the business. The business is ran off of one word, which is anticipation. Were people looking forward to it prior to the event? If the answer is yes, you might make some money. If it's no, then they weren't. But I would like to tell you this. There was a headline that came out today because not only did Dana not make this fight, Dana made this fight possible. He had the right, and you've had these contracts. You know, he could have tied you up in non-compete clauses. He could tie you up at a 90-day negotiate. He could tie you up on the right to match. He released Francis. Had Dana White not done that, this fight never takes place. But Ariel chose to tease him. And I want to give you one more thought because there was a headline today that was also supported by our good friend Ariel, and that is Francis had made a statement yesterday. UFC is to blame for me and Jon not happening. Jon and I both wanted it. To qualify for that to be true, when Francis and Jon were both under contracts and they already had worked out their numbers, all you have to know is who the next opponent is. When you refuse to honor those numbers and you want to renegotiate, you lose the right to say, we wanted to do it. If two guys that are under contract calls the boss and say, we made an agreement, we want to fight, there's nothing left to talk about except a date. I can look at your contract. I can look at yours. I know what I do when we move forward. That was not the case. They weren't willing to do that. And it might sound semantical, but it's very relevant. Dana didn't promote that boxing match. He didn't even watch the boxing match.
Yeah. Oh, so the beef was real. That was a real bit because I wasn't sure. I thought you guys were going to start a podcast or something like that because it was seen. It was a big clip. It was well known. Another thing that you're in the news for at the moment, Chael, and you're all over the place, Jorge Masvidal. Where did this come from?
I was going to ask you. I thought you silenced this guy years ago. This comes off of the Ariel piece. Masvidal, to the best I can understand, was defending Ariel. I got rude with Ariel. I was screaming at him. I told him I'd strangle him. Maybe they're really good buddies. I don't know. But Masvidal went on Ariel's show, and he cuts a promo on me, and he talks about I used to rob banks, and I broke rules of athletic commissions, and I never won a championship. I'm not saying he lied about me. It's the truth that hurts. I've known him 18 years. Like, he could say some things that would really embarrass me, and I couldn't believe that he was. And so it just comes from perspective. Okay, Masvidal, you know I'm going to pay you back. You know that's how this works. And I did.
Well, of course. You talk shit, you're going to expect it back.
Yeah, I didn't use the truth. I was funny, and I was provocative, but I didn't tell the truth about things I know about him. I only bring that because he caught me off guard. I wasn't looking for heat with Masvidal. I didn't even know I wasn't buddies with Masvidal. This is how I found out that Ariel's right. He's mad at me, and now George. And by the way, I'm not even in a fight with Ariel. Like, our argument had to do with something somebody else did. It wasn't that I'm mad that Ariel did something to me or he did something back. It was our opinion of something someone else did. There's no way Ariel and I could actually be mad at one another if we were ever true friends in the first place. And I just want to say that because Ariel's a great guy, and I'm not mad at him. I was pissed off in that moment. But that's okay. That passes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's funny because I was in New York last week and I did a piece for the New York Post. And I don't know what they were trying to do. They were trying to stir the pot. And of course, he brought up Ariel Helwani and the Paddy Pimblett situation and all the rest of it. And he said, what do you make of that? And my manager said, oh, the piece was great, but you should have talked shit about Helwani. I'm like, I didn't talk shit. All I said was, Ariel's a good guy. I said, I've known him for a long time. I said, we're not close buddies or anything like that, but we've always had a decent relationship. I said, but I'm not a fan of constantly attacking the UFC. The UFC's been great to me. It's changed my life. You know, people, it's so popular these days for people to talk shit about fighter pay and all the rest of it. And as you're talking about there, Francis Ngannou and all this type of things. How many lives has the UFC changed? You know what I mean? And look at this industry, this post-fight careers that we have, the career that Ariel Helwani has, all these fighters, all these teams. And the sport is massive. It's a worldwide spectacle. And that is because of the UFC. And because of Dana White. Now, granted, there might have been other promoters along the way, but these are the gold standard. So because of that, I'm a loyal guy. And I don't mind saying it. And anytime I talk about this shit, people come after me in the comment section, oh, he's a company man. He's a company man. I say, yeah, I am. I am a company man. I'm living in California. I live a great life. I've got savings in the bank. My children have a fantastic lifestyle. Why wouldn't I be a company man? You know, so I just said, look, listen, I don't mind Helwani. We've got a good relationship, but I'm not a fan of the constantly attacking the UFC because that's all he's trying to do the whole time. But anyway, we're talking about him. We're talking about it, and that's what he wants. He's winning, baby.
I would love to add to that thought, and not as a pile on Ariel session, but as a more, I see these same things. And the evil monster is Dana White, and Dana White exploits fighters. And I'm a historian in front of anything else. Like, you could go Google something, or you could call and just ask me. I do a really good job of remembering. And then when I'm commentating, Michael, I can just bring that out. I can use history as a reference point for why I think something's going to happen in the future. That's it. If you think that's a skill, then you might think I'm good at it, but that's all I'm really good for. The first person to ever say publicly fighters are being exploited was Dana White. When he bought this company in 2001, when he changed contracts, when he quit locking guys up for life, when he allowed people, you want to know one of Dana's biggest mistakes he ever made? He allowed fighters to get sponsors on their own. There is no executive producer of television that would ever allow one of their principals to bring a sponsor on their camera. They're the ones that get the money. The entire distribution and entertainment business is based around getting sponsorship money. So I only say because I keep hearing about this evil monster, Dana White. With Howday, hey, that was really nice for all those years that you let us do that as you were going backwards. There's not promoters now that allow you to do that. Saturday Night Live doesn't. I work on ESPN, Michael. If I show up with a watch on, they find out that I got paid to have the watch, That's
an
my
issue.
last day at ESPN.
Anytime I show up and I've got a logo on a t-shirt, even though I'm not sponsored, they're like, you can't wear that. I'm talking about TNT Sports in the UK. They're like, you can't wear that. You need a plain shirt like I'm wearing now because we can't have any logos for the same reason. And yeah, I mean, this wasn't the planned conversation, but you're right, because people always talk about boxing and how much money the boxers make. Yeah, granted, there's a few unicorns, and boxing is a very long, historic sport. We all know about the Mike Tysons, the Lennox Lewis, Muhammad Ali's, and there's a lot of wealthy people being created, but then on the flip side, and you look at mixed martial arts, if you look at, for example, Conor McGregor, Floyd Mayweather, you look at the people on the undercard of that, they're making way less of what entry-level UFC fighters make. And that's just an absolute fact. So this narrative is absolute bullshit. But people don't want to hear that. They don't want to accept that because it doesn't go with the narrative that they've been spoon-fed and then they now believe. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Well, and Michael, and they don't go together. One of the great examples of how awful the empire of UFC and Dana White was the fact that Francis Ngannou got $10 million. Now, when you try to tell somebody very calmly, hold on, he didn't make $10 million. He was given $10 million. Good for him, but there is a difference, right? Making it as a piece of the revenue and you get some and then everybody else gets some. When there's a loss, but it's what you got, it's given. I'm splitting hairs, but it's relevant because they say the fighters should be paid more. Look at these great profits by the UFC. Why is a bigger piece not given to the fighters? And it's like, okay, I hear what you're saying. You sound like a nice bleeding heart, but there is a litmus test to that. If you have an event, you want to be a piece of it. You want a piece of this like you hear about boxing. If we have an event and it loses money, are you willing to return money? If Francis Ngannou was to be given 50% of what they brought into that event, which lost $100 million, Francis would have been invoiced $50 million. That's silly what I'm saying. I know that's silly, but I'm trying to show people there's a difference within these arguments. You don't get to just come and say somebody's wrong when they're paying fair market value. You don't get to say this is what boxing does, so you should do that. What you should do is what you said you would do at the time you said you would do it. When Dana White starts bouncing checks or he starts renegotiating after the fact or he starts sending them late, feel free to yell and tell me what a scumbag he is. When he does everything that he said he would do in a market that created the price in an industry that's only going up. My first fight was in 2005. Fought Babalu Sabral, and I fought Babalu because nobody else would. Everybody was scared of this guy. My guy lost the fight. I got $2,000. I was thrilled to have it. But that was the minimum pay in 2005. It's not that much later. We're not even 20 years later, and minimum pay is 12 grand, 6 times what it used to be.
12 and 12 if you win.
Right. And another 12, but I'm just, I lost it. So it was 2,000 was the minimum pay. Now the minimum pay is 12 grand. There's not an industry out there that you can show me in 18 years is paying 6 times what it used to pay, but we're still going to give him a hard time. Go ahead. He didn't promote the fight. He didn't even watch the fight. You say he does business wrong. He does what he says he'll do. This is a sport that's so dirty, Michael, that the government had to come in to regulate it. So when you have a guy that came out, he's the first one to say you're being exploited. He changes the purse, he changes the contracts, he changes the numbers, and years later, you turn the gun on him. You're a scumbag. And I don't care if they call guys like you and I company men or not.
Yeah, no, and I couldn't care less. And they will do it because what I'm about to say as well. But what do you think about this? You hit on the key word there, sport. This is sport, okay? And yes, everybody wants to be a sportsman. Everybody wants to fight and become a professional athlete. They want to be on TV. They look at it now. Mixed martial arts is bigger than it's ever been. They look at it. They want to see it. There's a career path. There's a defined path that you can take, which there wasn't in your day and necessarily in my day back in the UK. Now there is. That's available to them. And if you're good enough, if you have a few fights, you get on a win streak and maybe you got a bit of a personality, you're marketable, yeah, you'll sign with the UFC. And 24 grand. If you win, that's your opening bit. If you're good enough, and that's a big if you're good enough, the cream rises to the top. Isn't it funny how, okay, there's some people that bitch and whine, but the majority of people, the fighters, aren't complaining. I've done very well. I was able to become a champion. I defended the belt once. I wasn't like an Anderson Silva or anything like that, but I've done very well. And in this sport, lots of people, if you're good enough, you will do very well. And if you're not good enough, well, then unlucky. And that's just a sad reality. It's a tough world out there. Why would they pay a ridiculous amount of money? You come in, they give you a shot, they give you a try. They don't know who you are. You're not selling tickets. You're not bringing things to the table. They're paying you to come here and advertise how good you are, essentially. And if you do well, then you renegotiate, you get sponsors and all the rest of it, and the endorsements and these opportunities and appearances. But of course, you make more money for your fights. And the sad reality is, if you're not good enough, then unlucky, buddy. Maybe go get a job doing something else.
No, it's just the truth. I mean, you want to come out and say, I hear this one a lot. Minimum pay is $12,000 and $12,000. That's terrible. It's like, well, let me explain something. The guy that got 12 and 12 just cost the company 24. He didn't bring in any money. And in his next fight, when he got 15 and 15, he just cost the company 30. Now, eventually there's a tipping point, but that's a very risky game, and that's the business. And if there is a tipping point, you got to get it. Look, one thing that regressed culture from the beginning of time is a lack of opportunity. It isn't necessarily getting the pot of gold, but if you had the chance, it was the pursuit. And the pursuit of the UFC is endless, where somebody makes it to where you did. Hall of Fame, world champion, defending on pay-per-view against guys like George St. Pierre. Whether they make it there or not, they had the opportunity, and they're happy and they're excited, and there's no.
And that's the dream, and that's the chase, and that's what makes it so special, and that's why it feels so good if you do it. You know what I mean? You don't want it handed to you. It doesn't want to be easy. You got to work your goddamn ass off, and hopefully one day you make it. And if you don't,
but that's also
well, I tried.
Yeah, it stops hard feelings, though, if you fail. Like, if a guy fails in our sport, he goes, yeah, but I had the chance. I'm glad that it happened. And I just say that because we have so many people on the outside coming in. We got the class action. We got all this different stuff coming in. As people are speaking for the fighters. The fighters are very happy. And historically speaking, I mean, guys now, how do you want to break it down? A guy got 12 and 12, and that sucks. Okay, well, he got 12 and 12 3 times a year. So he got a maximum of, nobody knows what that number is, but 12 and 12 plus 12 to work for 45 minutes. I mean, there's a lot of ways to break this down where all of a sudden it's not quite the evil empire you thought it was. There was a lot of opportunity pursuing a dream. Michael, I was a wrestler. That was so hard and so difficult and so many weigh-ins and so many hotels. And my dad had to work extra hours to pay that entry fee. I never got $1. I got a bad knee, an ugly ear. I had to miss the prom. I never got $1. And I never complained once. I loved it.
Absolutely. And so did I. I mean, talking of injuries, I'm sat here. I've got one eye. I've got a broken back in 2 places. I've got 2 total knee replacements. The list goes on. I've had to have my nose replaced. They rebuilt it with my ribs, on and on. My wrist is all swollen and painful every day. I need an operation on that. And people always say, any regrets? If you knew now how you would end up. And I said, no, I wouldn't change a thing. I am so lucky to live the life I lived. And the intention here, because we didn't speak about this beforehand, there was no plan to come in here and defend the UFC and defend Dana White, because he doesn't give a damn. He doesn't give a damn, and he doesn't need us to defend his case. But I work with 2 guys, Adam Catchell and Nick Pete, on TNT Sports, and they cover boxing big time. They know more about the sport of boxing than I ever will. I'm a fan, but I don't know about the inside politics as well as I do the UFC, obviously. And they say the same things we say. They know boxing. They know MMA. I work with them covering the UFC for the UK broadcaster, and they're saying the same thing. You know. So anyway, that wasn't the idea. How's your body these days, Chael?
I feel pretty good. You know, I'm back to exercising.
You're looking nice and lean.
I appreciate that. I've been watching my calories a little bit, which is never fun. It actually takes a discipline, but I've been doing it. And I used to tease people that would walk and then tell other people they were exercising. But now I find myself on a treadmill.
I'm doing the same thing. Yeah. I'm doing it. I was in New York last week. I was walking everywhere. And I was on the phone to my wife like, I think I've lost a few pounds. I must have done 5 miles today, you know? Oh, yeah. dear.
No, I'll hit the treadmill for a walk and then move some dumbbells. And I feel good about myself. So whatever.
You hit the bag, anything like that?
A little bit, every now and again. And my son's getting more active, and he just started wrestling. He's only 18 practices in. He's so few that he can keep track. And he likes when I come in the room with him. And when I go in, I try to do the warm-up, which is only 15 minutes. But, you know, you got handsprings, and you're walking on your hands and cartwheels. And, you know, I feel like I'm burning some calories. So maybe I'll stay busy with that. Maybe someday I'll get back into rolling around with him a little bit.
I still work out every day. I go I used to run every day, but now I sit on the Peloton. I do 30 minutes. I do 5 rounds on the bag, and then I lift my weights. Whether it's, you know, like a bodybuilder, I'll do chest and traps, shoulders and biceps, all that type of stuff. You know, but I enjoy it. I do. I like to stay in shape. talking of working out, I saw you had a very interesting take, and I actually really admired it. And you summed it up perfectly, talking about the Tony Ferguson and Paddy Pimblett fight, right? Because he's training with David Goggins. And as we know, that fight's 3 5-minute rounds, not a main event. So you've got to give the maximum you can give for 15 minutes. And David Goggins, listen, mentally, he's fantastic. And I think there will definitely be some benefits to Tony Ferguson working with David Goggins, because I don't think people understand. You have to respect Tony Ferguson. He's on a 6-fight losing streak. I don't think they understand how mentally tough you have to be to walk back into that octagon once again, knowing that you've lost your last 6 times. It's like journeyman boxers. You look at these journeyman boxers and they've got 70 losses on their record. That is so ballsy and so brave and so courageous to continue to do it because they enjoy the sport. And as we said before, there's the chance, there's the opportunity of feeling that victory, getting your arm raised. And that's what Tony's looking for. And I feel like David Goggins can help with the mental side of things. We talked about confidence. Confidence is key. And the mental side of things, the mind controls everything. But all that said, long distance, ultra marathons, going for hours and hours on end, walking on the treadmill, throwing up. You had a take that you only have so much to give, so much energy to give. Can you just elaborate on that? Because I thought you put that perfectly.
I have never, thank you for that compliment from you, but I have never stopped caring about the philosophies of the sport. Like Bruce Lee, I don't think beat anybody up or maybe had one fight in his life, but he's in the UFC video game. And the reason we keep old Bruce around is he had a philosophy way back in the 60s that turned out to be true. He was spot on to do from all arts and take whatever it is that would work in an actual situation for you, for whatever your body type and your preferences are. And I say that because I continue to philosophize. I'm having a hard time, Michael, accepting what I saw Francis do. I'm having a hard time because I believe in boxing. I gave so much of my life to boxing. Yes, I believe to make it to the top or to have a chance at the Olympic Games, you probably got to be a second-generation guy where your dad or your brother in the house is a boxer. You got to come right from school and go and put in all these hours. I believe
it's like wrestling. It's like wrestling. To be a really good wrestler, those guys are starting at 4 or 5 years old, and it's the same with the high-level, extremely top-level boxers. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes. Yeah, your dad converted a little piece of the garage, and he's got a mat in there. Like, this is all of their stories is the same. This is the second time. Francis doing it with Tyson or Conor doing it with Floyd. It's the second time in my life I've seen the greatest ever get beat up by a guy that never did it. And I was just having a hard time computing and how did this happen? I can't put myself in those shoes and go with the world champion of boxing in my weight class. How did these guys do it? One of the things that I'm surmising, I'll need a little bit more time, but I think, Michael, maybe we waste a lot of time. I think when we're in the corner, we're jumping rope and we're completely exhausted, or we're doing sit-ups, or we're shadow boxing, or we're hitting mitts, or whatever exercises it might be doing that aren't what we're going to be tested on. Like, there's no judge that's ever going to know who's a better jump roper, me or the other guy, or who ran more miles, me or the other guy, or whose nutritionist was better. That's not what we're actually doing. And if you start to throw down all the wasted time that we do, you spend how much versus what your opponent's doing on what we're going to be judged on. I think that's one reason that Francis was able to go so close. And the same thing with Conor. And the reason I bring that up is I love how hard Tony is working. And good things come from hard work. There's no question. But there's nothing, not the stair stepper, not the throwing up, not the lunges, not the sprints on the track. There's nothing that you'll be doing in the octagon against Paddy. And no matter how much you want to say it's cross-training or it helps, you might even be right. But I'm right, too. That's not what the judges are going to be watching for. So if you've only got so much energy at an older age like Tony, you might want to spend it in jiu-jitsu. You might spend it in wrestling. You might want to spend it in sparring. Something that resembles what you'll be doing opposite Paddy on December 16th. That's my only thought.
Yeah, well, that brings up a good point or a thought for myself because, these days there's a lot of emphasis on not sparring. Okay, I don't know about you, but I loved to spar when I was getting ready for fighting. I always loved to fight. I always enjoyed it. Sparring was always my favorite thing. And one of my coaches said years ago, he said, you've got to train the way that you're going to fight, right? And you can't replicate that feeling of being in a fight and you're absolutely exhausted and a fresh opponent comes in round after round and they're pushing you to the absolute level. You want to get better at football? Play football. You want to get better at tennis? Tennis. Swimming. It goes on and on. You want to get better at fighting? Guess what? You got to practice fighting. And I know there's a big emphasis on training smart, and I understand that. And overtraining, of course. I do think overtraining is a big scourge in this sport. It was definitely a problem for me. And you've got to, maybe plan your workouts and your sessions and all that a little bit better. But the sparring is absolutely essential. But people seem to be trying to find a way to avoid that. Thoughts on that?
Well, I fully agree. And I remember where that came in. Like, I had fought for world championship, small stuff, King of the Cage, Gladiator Challenge, WEC, but I'd fought for world championship. I'd never had a jiu-jitsu class yet. And I'd never had a boxing class yet. It used to be at Team Quest. We just sparred. We would come in and we would warm up. We would get warm doing something, and then we would spar. And we took care of each other. And the grappling was always 100% the strike, and we were always controlled. We didn't have a coach. It was Randy Couture and Dan Henderson and myself. Then Matt Lindland came in. Then Nate Quarry and Chris Lee. We got this really good group of guys. But every day we would have one conversation with each other at 3 o'clock. We'd look around the room and we'd take a vote. Big gloves or little gloves. And all we did was spar. And then you had some other gyms that got away from it. And we never did change where I was. We sparred 5 days a week. But there was other gyms that went down to 2. But, Michael, they went really hard. They were hitting each other. And, you could hear. I saw Wanderlei Silva spar one time with Forrest Griffin. I mean, these guys were hitting each other so hard. I was in the lobby, and I could hear these bangs. That's why I ran into the main room. And it was these two going at it. So, I mean, I'm just saying there is a difference. It depends how you're doing it. But if I break down Tony Ferguson, and I break down his most recent 6 fights against his other previous 6 fights, so his last 12. 2 things. First off, he's getting taken down more than he used to get taken down. And 2, he's getting hit more than he used to get hit. And how you correct that, I would like to see the energy going into that. I still am a believer that the best defense is a good offense. I think if Tony was going at his opponent, if he was trying to take the opponent down, if he was succeeding at controlling the grappling, he wouldn't have to worry about getting beat in that area. But that's my own belief. I used to be teammates with Tony Ferguson. I can tell you how hard this guy works. But that was in 2014. I don't see Tony face-to-face in practice for 5 years. He comes up to the set of ESPN after he beat Anthony Pettis in what was fight of the night. And I'm visiting with him. I'm visiting with my old buddy, Tony, before we
What did he say? Did he come at you for something
Michael,
you said?
He didn't come at me, but he told me that he hasn't sparred in years. He shared with me on a commercial break that he doesn't even have a coach. He shared with me that he runs the gym, but that he's international. I don't actually totally know what that means, but in fact, here, let me give you a great. You want to know what he says? So I got the earpiece in, and they throw it to the press conference where Dana White announces of the night bonuses, and he won one for his fight with Pettis. So he doesn't have the earpiece. I turn to him and go, Tony, you won fight of the night. I get to be the bearer of good news. How fun is that, right? And he goes, I don't know, man. I have no idea. And I go, oh, no. I'm telling you, hey, I got the earpiece. You won fight of the night. And he goes, I couldn't care less, bro. I got gyms all over the world. I've gone international. And he had his sunglasses on. His face never cracked.
That's what you got to love about Tony. He's out of his mind.
To this day, I don't know what I've gone international means.
I'm international.
But he looked cool as hell saying it with his sunglasses on. The guy from the Wheaties box, his 50 grand to get deposited into his account. I just shook my head and said, right on. I just moved on with my life.
No, that's hilarious. Tony is a wild one. And I'm looking forward to that fight. And I think it's going to be a fun one. I think Tony's got a chance of doing well, but Paddy's young. He's fresh. Just talking about the sparring thing, though, you reminded me of a story because you're absolutely right. Because we don't want to sound like a couple of dinosaurs that are meatheads, that we should be sparring and all the rest of it. Of course, you got to do it in a safe environment. And as you were talking, I thought back to when I was training for one of my fights. I detached my retina, as everyone knows, when I fought Vitor Belfort. I was coming back. I was supposed to fight Mark Munoz. I was getting ready. I'm down at the Ruka gym, and I was training with Eric Paulson at that time. Munoz is a good wrestler. Eric Paulson's a master at everything. He's got a lot of wrestlers and catch wrestling and things like that. So training with Eric Paulson and Jason Perillo, and the sparring, we always went heavy. I don't know what it was like with you. We'd always say, well, we'll do it nice and light. We'll start off okay, and then one guy lands a good shot, the next guy lands one. Before you know it, by the time it comes to round 2, you're just swinging everything. But as long as no one gets hurt, that's great. The problem is people do get hurt. And I redetached my retina. One of my other sparring partners, he broke his hand. Do you know what I mean? The thing was an absolute shit show. So yes, I do believe sparring is absolutely essential, but of course, you live and learn. We've been going for a while, Chael. Go on.
And Michael, by the way, my intent here is to praise and maybe defend Tony Ferguson. I feel like maybe I'm giving him a hard time, but when I was teammates with him, he fought in practice. He fought to the point it was a problem. And we went 5 days a week. It was 2 days in small gloves and 3 days I was at the range training center, but it was very controlled, but not everybody. he was one of the not everybody's. And he would tell teammates, if you want to spar with me tomorrow, you better come to knock me out today. And these younger guys, I mean, they would love it. Sean Strickland was one of those younger guys, just to put in perspective how hard this room was. When practice would end, and I could name names, bro. I could name top names. When practice would end, we'd all be exhausted.
That's legendary.
He would have 5 guys line up. Tony Ferguson, practice is done. The coaches are done. We're in a line for the show. We're done. We're out of energy. He would line 5 guys up, and every time the bell would go off, a new guy would come. Every 5 minutes, a guy would come in. He would do that until those 5 got tired. He stayed in the middle. They got a 20-minute break before they had to come back in. He would wear them all out, and then he would go to the heavy bag. I mean, it really was absolutely incredible, but if you play that game, boy, you're going to be sharp at points in your career, but that it will dull itself a little bit. I don't suggest he's there. I just suggest there's a balance. I'm not positive he's found it. I like his chances in this fight with Paddy a lot more than other people. I think that Tony's overtrained. I don't know that Paddy's trained at all. I don't know that you can go into camp and have to lose 50 pounds and truly focus on the sport. It feels like you're focused on the scale. I don't know that about Paddy. I'm guessing, but I think Tony's in a better spot than many do.
100%. And certainly when you look at, I mean, look, we all know the standard and the quality of his last 6 opponents. Bobby Green, if you will, was maybe a step down from, say, Michael Chandler or Justin Gaethje and Oliveira. But when you see what Bobby Green just did to Grant Dawson, knocked him out in 33 seconds, that elevates Bobby Green, I think, in the minds of a lot of people. So listen, you can never underestimate Tony Ferguson. But as you were talking about sparring and things like that, I wanted to hear your take, because the world or the sport of mixed martial arts has changed so much. I mean, you were here before I was. I was back in the early days of the UK. It was like the Wild West. You know what I mean? I remember going to fights, and there was a guy, Ross Poynton. I was on the Ultimate Fighter with him. I used to fight on Cage Warriors, and I remember going to Cage Warriors. He'd had a brawl at the traffic lights on the way to the gym. You know, people were selling steroids. There was gangsters. There was drug dealers that were promoting the events, and there were money laundering events, and all. You know, it was madness. It really, really was the Wild West. And now, when you look at this sport, it's amazing. It's on TV. It's everywhere. ESPN. I mean, did you ever think the sport in 30 years since the UFC was founded, did you ever think we'd get to this stage?
Never. All the claims that Dana White made, I chalked him up to being a pro, and I didn't believe one of them. They're going to get mainstream. They're going to sell out arenas. They're going to be a weekly event. They're going to be on the Worldwide Leader. I didn't believe a single one of them. And I remember growing up in school, almost every year that I was, on the first day, the teacher would ask us the same question: what do you want to be when you grow up? And we'd write it on our paper. I never would have said commentator or fighter. I remember getting my hair cut not that long ago, like 2007 and 8, and having the beautician ask me what I do, and I lied because I didn't want to go to UFC.
I did the same thing. I signed up to a gym. I signed up to a gym one day because I was training for a fight. And she said, what do you do for a living? So I said, I'm an athlete. And she said, oh, what kind of athlete? I said, I'm a fighter. She says, what kind of fighter? And I knew if I said mixed martial artist, she would not have a clue. So I said, I'm a cage fighter. And she looked at me like I was an absolute psycho.
No, you did not gain a respect. You lost the respect for it.
Yeah.
So I would never would have told someone, I want to be a fighter, I want to be an athlete, or I want to be a commentator, I want to have a YouTube channel. Like, those weren't things. They were for other sports, but they weren't for us. So when you asked me like how fast it's progressed, no, I couldn't believe it. Even Dana White, to go back to when he said, we'll run towards regulation. If you don't have regulation, we're not coming to your area. I was on my 5th fight the first time I saw a scale. I was on my 7th fight the first time we ever had to wrap our hands, when that was required. So, yeah, I mean, it was just a different time back then. Like, I do get a little bit frustrated. I don't really think of myself as a company man, as much of a historian. When we have today's guys who are complaining, who are on television, who get to fight a guy their own size. I couldn't imagine fighting a guy my own size, where they're going to wrap your hands and he doesn't get to cover himself in Vaseline, and he's probably not going to be on steroids if he's in certain organizations. Like, these were a dream back then. I never even would have asked for those things. I didn't know I could. So I just, sometimes with today's guys, when they complain how great it is and they forget about the people that helped to set the table, I think I get a little defensive.
Yeah, and certainly and by the way, this is not directed at anybody. When you look at the resources that they have these days, you know, I mean, they show up fight week and they are given all of their food. The PI assess their weight, how they need to approach the weight cut, give them a strategy and say, here is your food, here are your meals. I remember back in the day, I would fly to the other side of the world and we would be walking around because obviously you want to keep it low carbohydrate. You don't want any sodium or salt in there, same thing. And studying the menus, you know what I mean? So, oh no, this one isn't going to work. Walking to another restaurant, so on and so forth. And then sitting down and I would lie to the waitress and say, can you please ask the chef? No salt. And she would say, oh no, the chef put salt in everything. And I'm like, I'm allergic to salt. She goes, there's no such thing as being allergic. I said, trust me, I've got a very rare condition. If I take in any salt, I might die. You know, and so we used to go to those kind of lakes. They got everything weighed out for them. They've got the foods provided to them. They've got the sauna suits. They've got the whole bit, the Performance Institute. And I think it's incredible how far the sport has come.
No, I fully agree. I date back to 2005, and we used to do some events that would be at the Hard Rock in Vegas on a Wednesday night on a network that I can't produce for you right now. I think it might have been Fuel TV, or it was one of these off-brand. It would happen at 6 o'clock. They'd air it at 9.
I think it was Fuel TV. I remember those.
It might have been Fuel. But sport and news are two programs that must be viewed live. We were so unpopular. They would air it 3 hours late. Nobody would know. We do it on a Wednesday. They'd air it on Sunday. Nobody would even know. It was just a very different time. And then even at the Hard Rock, there'd only be a few people there. And I remember staying in hotels across the street, and it's all your cornermen in the same room. And this was still the best treatment in the highest paid organization where you got bonuses, you were allowed to get spot. Like everybody was trying and everybody was pitching in together. And even as the organization was getting their ass kicked, we were all doing it and rising up together. And I do feel like a little of that attitude's lost. And if people study the sport, I think they would have more appreciation.
And I was going to say, and loving every single second. I couldn't believe it. I mean, listen, at the start, in the early days, I was getting paid next to nothing. But you know what? I was doing what I wanted to do. You know, I wasn't working at a factory. I wasn't doing some dead-end job. I wasn't on the building sites breaking my back. I was having my jaw broken, but I was happy to be there, happy to do it. And it's a wonderful thing. Chael, I have enjoyed this talk, man. We're going to do this more often.
I miss you, buddy. Hey, congrats. Can I tell you one thing? Can I have 1 minute, please?
No, please. Okay. I'm good.
I have a feeling you know this. I'm not attempting to condescend to you and act like I'm good buddies with Tom, but I'd like your view.
Don't pull an Ariel Helwani on me.
But I would like, not for you, I'd like your viewers to hear this. So I had never met Tom Aspinall. I'm a fan, right? You might even call me a jock writer. I know Tom's pretty good. Tom wins his fight. He comes up to the set of ESPN. You actually came up with him, but I get pulled off camera. So now I'm with Tom's team, which includes his father. It includes his nutritionalist, who's his cousin. First time I meet any of these guys. So Tom's doing his interview and you come on with Brett. We're all on the side. One of the teammates, one of the cornermen says to me, the only thing that he's better at than fighting is being a father. And I stopped in my track. Why'd you say that? Why did you just say that? How does that help me when I'm going on ESPN? And I said that to him. So why did you just tell me that? He said, Chael, he's an amazing person. You wouldn't believe it. I said, but why do you say that about father? Like, there's no bigger compliment you could give a man. But saying a guy can beat up every man alive, that's a big deal. Saying he's a better father than that, no bigger compliment. I said, why'd you say that? He said, Chael, he has 3 kids. Talking about Tom. One of them has special needs, autistic. His wife and Tom could not find, on short notice of 2.5 weeks, they could not find what they deemed to be adequate health care. So she stayed home. They didn't want somebody staying with the family. She missed her red carpet moment, being part of that, being the walk-in shot where girls go and get made up and it's all these beautiful things. She stayed home because they didn't decide they could find somebody appropriate enough for their children. That's awesome. You're an awesome dad. I wanted you to hear that, and I wanted your audience. I have no other point. I just wanted your audience to hear that story.
And that says everything you need to know about Tom Aspinall. As I said, I haven't known him particularly long. You know, a couple of years now, 2-3 years. And I am constantly impressed by him, his father, his teammates. I mean, they're all so close. And by the way, he has got a ridiculous team right now that his father has assembled. I mean, when they show up, like in London at Fight Week, because there was more of them there because it was in the UK, they just drive down the motorway, the freeway. And you know that they're in the room. They are big, big, nasty guys, but the nicest, most humble people. And as you said, that's the best compliment you can ever get. Being the baddest man on the planet, which he just might be right now, but being the best father as well, even better. Chael, I got to run off because we're talking about bodies. On the back of my neck, you might be able to see it. Maybe not. I've got a lidocaine patch. I've got a lidocaine patch. I'm off to the doctors. They're going to do an ablation on my neck. They're going to stick needles in, fry the nerves. Hopefully, I'm not going to be in pain the whole time. Hopefully, I'm not going to have these headaches. So I'll have to cut this short. But, brother, this has been beautiful.
Get better. I've had enough of you anyway. Good luck.
Exactly. See you soon.
See you, Mike.